Hello, this is Jessi Slutton from Empowering Postpartum. Welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. And while you download, leave a comment. The app is completely free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Thank you again for tuning in today. We have a great episode scheduled for you guys. Again, my name is Jessi Slutton, your postpartum empowerment coach, helping you feel confident, prepared, and holistically supported for your unique journey into parenthood. And this morning, I have on with me Tara Moeller. She's a leadership and certified coach, founder of Motherhood Balanced. And we're going to be talking about a super important topic that I think not many of us really plan for, which, let's be honest, that's a big portion of our postpartum experience. We don't really plan ahead very well for these kind of things, but this one is a really big one because it's all about how we can prepare ourselves confidently going back to work after we give birth, after our maternity leave. So we're going to be sharing a bunch of really great tips, and Tara is going to be sharing her knowledge with us today. So thank you for joining us, Tara.
Thank you for having me, Jessi. It's a pleasure.
Yes, and I'd love for us to just kind of kick things off with you just sharing a little bit about yourself, how you got into the work that you do, and how you help women prepare for this big transition.
Sure. Well, goodness, I feel like I got into this work because of necessity. I am and I went back to second child. I really struggled. And I struggled kind of putting all of the pieces of my life kind of back together, or all the pieces I felt I needed to have kind of into that same structure, that I had before that second child. And it just didn't fit, right? Like everything did not fit. So I started feeling honestly like a failure in lots of different areas of my life. In particular, two that were most important to me, was being a good mom, right? I wanted to be that good and present parent to my two children, but I also, had this career that I was passionate about, that I had worked very hard to get to the point where I was. I still loved my career. So really trying to kind of balance those two things out in particular was really a struggle for me. So I had to figure it out on my own. And I think, Facebook at some point knew that I was struggling and sent me an ad for a coach. And I'm like, and I do coaching still on the professional side. I'm an engineer by background, and I do coaching on improvement in the healthcare system. So I was familiar with coaching, but I had never had like a personal coach, like for me, right? And so I'm like, this sounds like something I might benefit from. So I ended up chatting with her and hiring her like on my own time, like with my own money. And it was just such an amazing experience. And I feel like she really helped me get kind of through that tricky point and to a place where I felt good about the various parts of my life, and I could, kind of, balance or harmonize all of those out. That I'm like, more women need these tools, these strategies, and these skills. And I feel like, we're not supported enough, especially after birth.
Amen.
I heard one time it's not just the birth of the baby, right? Like it's the birth of a mother as well.
Absolutely.
And so that's really how I got into this.
I love that. And I think I find that so much with a lot of the guests who come on the show, in my own personal experience, just being able to have that personal experience with, a mentor, a coach, to really help you see outside. Because I think we get so much tunnel vision, and we don't know how to take a step back and really be like, how do I get out of this, this stuck place? And so, just being able to have that experience of having a personal coach, and they're connected, and they're there for the care for you. They want you to succeed. They want you to feel supported, but they're also disconnected enough where they can say, okay, let's really take a look at this critically and see where we shift some things around. And so, yeah, that's kind of my story as well. After my first birth, I had a terrible experience with postpartum, and I didn't want that again for my second birth. So I ended up hiring a postpartum coach, and it just changed my life forever, because I was like, this is exactly what I want to do to help other moms really embrace, this type of transition. And it's a huge one in our lives. And like you said, there's just not enough support out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know we have a couple of really great topics that we wanted to tackle today, which I think is going to be really helpful for our viewers. And I think the first one we wanted to talk about is one that we all can relate to so much, and that's that guilt that we can start feeling, especially when we see that countdown on the maternity leave clock, right? Like we're just feeling so guilty about leaving our baby, and we're just kind of grappling with those feelings. And so I'd love to get your perspective on, how to approach that, or any tips that you might have around that guilt piece.
Yeah, definitely. And this was something that, I felt as well.
Yeah.
Moms that I talk to, and this is one of the most common issues, right? That I see come up for people. It's just this internal feeling, and especially I think when we're handing our kids off, right, to care or to other caretakers, right, because we're going back to work, and sometimes there's some women who have to go back to work from a financial standpoint, right? Some of us, there's kind of a mixture between having that financial reason, but then also just wanting to work, right? And I think that often pulls us in kind of two directions, right? And one of the things that I had to learn for myself was, because I wanted to work, because I always knew that I was not going to be a stay-at-home mom, and that was just something internally, like I had felt for a very long time. I had to find a way to feel good, right, about that situation.
Right.
So, more often than not, like guilt is confused, I think, with sadness. And sometimes it's a little bit of a combination of the two. But when I looked up even the definition of guilt, right? I just want to read this from the wise old internet. The definition was a feeling or worry of unhappiness that you have because you've done something wrong. Or it's the fact of having committed a specified or implied offense or crime, right? So sending our, kids to daycare so that we can fulfill a part of our lives by working, right, is not wrong.
Right.
Right. It's not something that is an offense or is a crime, right? So I think that, feeling, we can definitely feel sad about it. And trust me, I cried more than my daughter did the first day after maternity daycare. They actually called me like in an hour and just said, "Hey, I know drop off was a little rough." For me, right? I know drop off was a little rough. I just want you to know, like, she's doing fine. And that was so heartwarming, right? Because it wasn't guilty though. It was sadness. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss her. Like, I'm not going to be able to be spending this time with her anymore, right? But I did know that for me, that was the best decision for myself and my family. So I think, just making sure we're not confusing guilt with, sadness, that first step. And then, to kind of get over, if you're still feeling guilty, like you're doing something wrong by, sending your kid to daycare or having someone else take care of them while you're doing, the other things in your life. I would encourage you to think about the benefits, right? Not only to yourself, but to that child as well, right? Because often there's not one, and I believe there's often not one right or wrong decision.
Right.
There's only a best decision for you in
Mhm.
your particular situation, right? And
Right.
your family.
Yeah.
So, once you decide what that best decision is,
Mhm.
you're just making yourself believe it.
Right.
It's
Yep.
kind of rooting into all of those reasons why this is a good decision with the information that you have at this point in time and for this season of your life.
Yes.
So, when I sent, my kid to daycare, uh, again, like I felt sad, but
Mhm.
I knew a few things. I knew she was going to be well taken care of
Mhm.
because, oh my word, did I do my research. Right? I
Yes.
mean, we
Right?
have
That's like one of those things you spend the most time on is just like, okay, this is a big deal. You're caring for my baby. I need to feel comfortable. I need to know they know what they're doing, that they'll be receptive to my feedback or, being like the mom who still wants to be in charge, right? Even when I'm not there. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big process.
So, I mean, if you spend, and we all do, we don't just willy-nilly hand our
No.
kids off to people we don't
Right.
trust or in situations that we don't feel comfortable about, right?
Right.
So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, I had to remind myself all the time. I knew that my kids were going to be well taken care of, right?
Right.
I knew that just because of my own fulfillment, I was going to be able to be a much happier, sane, and
Mhm.
fulfilled woman by having this other part, of
Yes.
my life. And therefore, you know, I can come home and be completely like overjoyed to be with
Yes.
my kids, um,
Mhm.
and be that present mom that I
Yes.
want to be, right? And that happier mom. Um, for me, I also wanted my daughter to witness uh,
Mhm.
a woman, right, who was doing something that she was passionate about,
Yes.
because I want to demonstrate that. Like, I want to allow her to believe that she can do anything like that she wants, right?
Yes. Yep.
Um, and so for me, that was important to just continue to demonstrate that. So, I just had to come up with the reasons, right?
Mhm.
Focus on those reasons that make your decision right for you,
Yes.
right? And
I
there's
love
always
that.
going to be the other things to look at. Yeah, right.
Right.
I'm not trying to make a pro con list here. I'm
Mhm.
essentially just making a pro list, right?
Yes.
Trying to focus on, all of the reasons why this is the best decision
Yeah.
uh, for me and my family, like at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really great advice. And, I loved what you said too with your first point about, the difference between guilt and sadness. And, I think so much of these changing phases of our early parenthood is about allowing ourselves to grieve when
Mhm,
we've moved through one phase, right? And I think that this is a great example. Like, I
mhm,
always tell my clients, like, you got to feel the feels, right? You
mhm,
can't just like deny yourself that because then you get stuck, right? And you start bottling things in and resentment bubbles up and all these things happen. And so I,
mhm,
I absolutely agree with your point that it's maybe there's some guilt there that maybe comes from societal pressures or
mhm.
expectations that don't quite fit what you say is what's right for me and my family, right? And that's where their second piece comes in is like, okay, this might be what I feel pressured to be, in this phase of life, but this is really what's going to work best for me. But that grief, is definitely present, and it's okay to feel that sadness,
Mhm,
to mourn that phase, with your baby, but then, like you said, embrace the change, embrace that this is the best decision, and you made this decision very thoughtfully, and
mhm,
trust that instinct, trust yourself to know what's best for you and your baby and your family as a whole.
mhm,
So I just love everything you just said. I think it's really a great message for all of us to think about, regardless of what phase maybe we're moving into, right? But
yes,
especially around this returning to work piece, because I do know,
mhm,
myself included, like I was just beside myself with leaving my young little baby, and the crazy thing is I had my mother watching him, and so I absolutely trusted who was watching him. I absolutely knew he was loved and cared for, but
right,
still, it was like, um that sadness of having to leave him and, just getting through that
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think, this is probably a good segue for us into like the second point we wanted to talk about. And really that was, making these clear boundaries for yourself and expectations, and then being able to communicate those effectively with, your boss, your teammates, just so that you can set yourself up for a more successful return to work. So I'd love to get your expertise on how to do that with more
Yeah.
confidence.
So this was one I did completely wrong.
We all learn from our mistakes, right?
Oh
And then
my
we teach others to do it better.
Yes, exactly. That is my hope. So, boundaries continue to be such a tool and such a huge thing that's helpful, right? And the way I use Carly Fain's definition of a boundary, and a boundary is really just a agreement that you've made with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so it's agreement between yourself and yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now,
Nobody else is involved.
it's a decision, right? Something that
Mm-hmm.
you've decided. Now, sometimes, right, those boundaries do need to be communicated.
Yes.
Sometimes those boundaries do need to be negotiated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if
Yep.
you're like, for example, like part of a team at work, you can't probably just say, hey, I'm taking every Wednesday off, right? I mean, that probably like needs to be negotiated or discussed. But once I recommend a couple of boundaries when you're returning to work. The first is a clear start and a clear end time.
Mm-hmm.
So before motherhood, I didn't really have this,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I would always come into work by a certain time, but sometimes a little earlier, sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't, but now when you have kids, right, you've got drop off, you've got a morning routine, you've got a whole bunch of crap you have to pack for, like
Right.
so much, you got to get 4 people ready in the morning. Just kidding.
Right.
Like,
Exactly. It's chaos.
so basically be very clear on like, hey, what time do I start work? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then what time do I end work? And be true to yourself on that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the way I choose to hold that boundary. So I talked to my manager, right,
Mm-hmm.
about what I wanted to do. They had no pushback whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. Right. I write on my calendar, right? Because we have like shared calendars that people can busy search, whatever. But I actually block off the morning time as busy up until the time I start, right?
Yep.
Then the time that I end is also marked busy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
what this does is when someone is looking for time on my calendar, right, or they schedule an appointment, that time is actually not available.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Now, are there situations where sometimes I have to flex that? Yes, I do. In general, right, I stick to those boundaries, right? If someone sends me a request before my start time, I'm like, hey, like, I can't meet at this time, but what about, tomorrow or Thursday at X or Y?
Right. Yep.
And I didn't do this correctly at first, right? Because I was trying to make, again, everything fit in my life.
Yeah.
What I learned, at the end of the day, you have to prioritize in
Yes.
order for it all to fit. And so when you're able to just hit that decline button, right, and or give some other times that you're available, it just allows you to take more control of your calendar. Because frankly, we have other things to do, right?
Right.
Work is one component of our life. But we now have to be home. We have to pick the kids up, right? And we want to spend quality time with them.
Yeah.
So the other boundary that I recommend setting is no work emails.
Yes. When you're home, you're home.
I do, unless you're on call, right?
Yeah, right.
On call all the time, right? Like I recommend you just make that clear separation, because when you get pulled back into work, you're not being present
No.
with your family, and you're
Right.
not valuing that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just, for me, it allows me to kind of compartmentalize.
Yes.
When I'm at work, I really try to be at work. I'm
Yeah.
trying, and sometimes the worries come up about what's my daughter doing or what's my son,
Right.
but it's
Mm-hmm.
like, listen, I will see them and I will be able to be totally present with them if I get all my stuff done right now.
Right. Right. Exactly. That motivation. Mm-hmm.
Get everything done, right? Then I can close that out, boom, and
Yep.
then able to be the mom, right,
Mm-hmm.
in those other hours.
Yeah.
So that sometimes also requires an escalation process or conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because some of my clients, they're like, well, but I need to, what if blah 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 happens?
Mm-hmm.
What if I need to respond to this email? And I'm like, well, first of all, is it actually an emergency?
Right.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what would happen if you responded at 9 a.m. when you got in the next day? And most of
Right.
the time, it's like, well, nothing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's our own internal fear that, like,
Yes.
people won't see us as responsive.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started doing this, I actually got kudos from my teammates, and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Wow, you never answer an email at night." And I said, "No, I
Mm-hmm.
don't." Right?
Right. Well,
Because
if you're not respecting your own boundaries, then others around you aren't going to. So you have to really show them and model that for them. Like, this is a true boundary for me and I'm not willing to cross that. Oh,
right,
okay. Then, that's just the way it is. I'm not gonna push you or expect you to do that. But if you're breaking your own boundaries, then that opens the door for that
mhm,
expectation, or people, and even if it's not a nefarious thing, like, people just assume like, oh, I guess that's not really a true boundary for them and it'll be fine. So
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I think what that allowed, when people started seeing me do that,
Mm-hmm.
they were like, "Oh, nothing terrible is happening. Like,
Yeah.
she's still doing her work. Like,
Yep.
she's still doing a good job. Huh, maybe I
Mm-hmm.
maybe I could do that too." Right?
Right. Yeah.
So it almost gave other people in my department, like, the internal permission,
Mm-hmm.
like, do the same thing, and kind of
Yes.
have more of that separation of,
Yes.
of work and home. Now, if there is something that you would literally need to handle
Mm-hmm.
before your next sign-on time, then, you need to have an escalation process, a clear escalation process
Mm.
that doesn't
Yes.
require you checking your email or
Right.
team messages, right? If
Mm-hmm.
something's that urgent, someone needs to call you or
Yes.
text you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
just making sure that those processes are developed and are very clear and communicated,
Yes.
are important.
Yeah, I love that, because then that, it gives everybody direction. Like, okay, this is what a true emergency would be. Like, if I am the only one that can solve this problem, then yes, and then here's the pathway to get to me, right? Like, I
Yeah.
love that, being very clear, making sure everybody understands, is on the same page, right? Because if
Mhm.
we just assume everybody is, that's a recipe for disaster. And you're going to be getting emails pinging, and people are like, why aren't you responding? And, these false fires that seem to pop up all the time.
No, no, exactly. It's like, no, actually, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
If I choose not to address this in the next, 10 hours.
Right, exactly. Well, and I love the piece about being present with the place that you're in, right? And so you're
Mhm,
being very present and intentional when you are within your work hours. And for a lot of like my clients who are still breastfeeding, or, are having that grief that they're still processing through because they missed their little one, schedule
mhm,
that into your time, like Tara is saying, like, make that maybe a part of your lunch break. Like, for me, when I went and did my pumping breaks, I would always work it in where I would try to do a quick FaceTime with my baby, right? Not only does
mhm,
that help you, increase milk production if that's something you're struggling with pumping, but also it gives you that little piece of
mhm.
connection, right? But it's during a very specific time. So then you can then say, okay, I'm done with that piece. Now I'm going to be back present with my job, right? And I'm not thinking about all morning, like, oh gosh, did they take the bottle? Did they do all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Just, establishing those ways of still connecting, but within, a way where you can compartmentalize, kind of like you said, your time, because it's really hard. I work from home. And so it's like that can be a very difficult boundary to create because it's like you're home and you're present, but you need to be present working and not so much with your kids, right? And so that's a really hard balance. So I don't know if you have any tips for, our working from home parents, but, I'd love to hear some ideas that you might have for those folks.
So I'm going to be honest with you. So during the pandemic, right, when everyone was sent home,
Yeah.
uh, my husband and I both had to work from home, right?
Mhm.
The kids in our home. And that lasted, I want to say maybe about a week before we were like, oh my gosh, we
This
can
is too much. Yeah. Mhm.
holy camole, right? Well,
Mhm.
and at that point, we didn't have care. We were trying to work and care. So, I mean,
Yes.
the first piece of advice from the limited experience I have from my kids being in my house, right? I mean, you
Right.
have to have childcare, right? I feel
Yes.
like to be effective, right? And that just all that is allows you to be that present person and do your best quality work, and
Yep.
then know that your little one is being taken care of, right? You're not
Yes.
because multitasking, is a myth. It's been busted, right? Like
Yes.
single tasking is the most productive way to
Right. Yep.
do things. So that, once we were able to figure out a care situation, but they were still in the home,
Mhm.
that's produced other struggles like okay, coming out of, whenever I came out of the office, then it's like I see them,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's like mom,
Right. Yep.
then I had to figure out ways to essentially kind of limit my out and about time,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Again, like doing a little bit of that compartmentalizing,
Mhm.
like
Yep.
like making kind of scheduled breaks and times where I could come out and connect, but then
Mhm.
know that, okay, now I'm leaving, I'm going back into
Mhm.
my office, the door is
Right.
closed, right?
Yes.
And that's the
Mhm.
signal that
Yep.
unless it's an emergency, again, like that I'm working, right?
Right, right. No, I love that because it's almost like your kids, and this is, of course, if they're older. If they're
Mhm.
itty bitty babies, like it's a little bit easier to, from a child standpoint, to kind of, manage that. Now, you might be the one to be like, "Oh, I hear them crying. I think I just need to go downstairs," right? So that's that kind of figuring that out with internally for yourself. But it's kind of funny. I tell my husband, I'm like, "Okay, my kids, so they're going to be 8 and 4, so they're a little older now, right? But they're still at the stage where they prefer me over anybody else that could be around, right? But for me, I treat them almost like my little coworkers. Like, so I create boundaries with them, right? And I'm very clear about, okay, this is mommy's work time. Like you said, when the door is closed, I'm unavailable. If I have
Mhm.
the door open, it's maybe because I'm doing a task that you can come see me for, right? And just being very clear about that with your kids, ahead of time, and keeping to that, because it can be confusing for them
Yeah.
if you're starting to go back and forth on those boundaries that you've drawn, for your work time, for sure. But it is a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge to do the work from home thing when you have kids in your house, but it's doable if you kind of apply these same concepts of creating those boundaries, creating these
Mhm.
specific time frames of when you're going to be present mom and when you're going to be present worker. And it's just finding that rhythm, I think.
No, and again, like finding what works for you, right?
Yes.
And kind of creating a little structure around that.
Hmm.
And the one thing that I developed when we were all at home
Yeah.
was actually a tool that I continue to use.
Mm.
And it's this transition process. Like I have a
Mhm.
4-step transition process at the end of the day, because
Okay.
I was finding, like, literally, like walking, there was only a door now
Right.
between my work
Yes.
and
Mm.
my home, right?
Mhm.
And I
Yep.
used to have a commute. I used to at
Right.
least have, like, some time to process, listen to music or a podcast, or I used to have some
Right.
informal even transition. Now I had,
Mhm.
boom, open the door, and I'm like
Right.
home, right?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
so I had to, for myself, create a transition process, and it's only like 5 or 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But it focuses on closing out the workday, right?
Mhm.
Making myself understand, like, okay, what did I get done? And by the way,
Mhm.
you've done enough. Like,
Yeah.
you've done enough to to shut down for today and
Yes.
go do the other important parts of your life, right? So I would
Yes.
write a couple of wins, And
Mhm.
then I would write down what I call my hit list for the next day, my high
Yeah.
impact task list. So it's I
Mhm.
literally, if there's things I didn't get to, I write them on my next day's planner. Only 3. Boom, boom, boom. Right.
Yep.
So I know that I will start with that tomorrow. I don't need to
Mhm.
do it tonight. I don't
Yes.
need to think about it tonight. I don't, whatever. And then I actually have like a 5-minute calming my body,
Yeah,
mind.
grounding. Mhm.
And I'm not, I'm becoming more of, I guess, a pseudo meditator, but like I am not like a woo-woo, like I'm an engineer, right?
You're
So
right.
you can meet a
Right.
and do a meditation, like it's kind of a miracle. But I
Right.
found that that this was really helpful because my mind was still in
Oh,
work mode,
yes.
go, 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 go.
Mhm.
That makes your body feel that way too.
Yeah.
So I actually had to sit for 5 minutes, right? Sometimes I would do a guided meditation on insight.
Mhm.
Um, now I made my own, right? Sometimes I
Mhm.
would set a timer, but like I needed that 5 minutes to just get myself into a state and remind myself who I wanted to be
Yes.
on the other side of that door. What
Yes.
kind of energy did I want to bring
Mhm.
when I walked through that door? I did not want to
Yes.
bring any kind of work crap energy. Like,
Yeah.
so I have good days, I have bad days, right? We all do. But like,
Right.
I wanted my kids to feel my presence in a certain way. And so
Mhm.
I started being very intentional with that when again, there was only that door between us with that transition.
Yes.
And it still helps. Now,
Mhm.
like I still have back to commuting sometimes and I
Yeah.
still do it before like I walk in. I had a client who would sit in her driveway like
Mhm.
and do like the 5 minutes like before she walked in
Mhm.
the house. And it was something that
Yes.
was just really helpful. Right. So again, that is just that boundary,
Mhm.
creating
Yep.
that separation for me was really helpful between, work and home as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this idea of, kind of an end of day ritual where you are kind of creating that transition not only for the physical work, but you're regulating your nervous system, right? Because sometimes we can be like, even if we had a good day, our thoughts are maybe racing about, oh gosh, this is going to be great for tomorrow. And I can't wait to, start getting on this project or whatever. It could be a positive thing, but then we're up here, right? And then we're already kind of dysregulated in an exciting energy kind of way. And then really we kind of want to be more neutral, right? When we kind of walk into that door, so we can be that calming presence and that,
Mhm.
um, just that connective presence for our kids
Mhm.
when we walk in and be home. And I think it's such a great idea to have just a 5-minute ritual for yourself, however that would work, whether it's a meditation. Some ideas I've had for myself and some clients, coloring can just be very calming. It can be grounding. So something that feels good for your body and feels good for calming your nervous system can be incorporated into these
Mhm.
rituals. And I had a friend who she worked from home, and part of her ritual was she would light the candle when she was starting work, right? And so she'd have that as kind of her beginning ritual, because I think that's important to have too,
Oh, yeah.
because you could be coming right from breakfast, right, and the chaos of the kitchen, and you come into your office and you're like, how am I going to start work now? I'm still in mom mode, right? So having that beginning ritual could be really helpful too. But when the work time was done, the candle would go out, and that was kind of a signal for herself to start that decompression and shifting in the roles.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because
Yeah.
again, it's just that it's that thing that you can see. It's like a
Yes.
visual indicator of
Mhm. Yep.
okay, I'm moving on to another a different but also important part of my life, right? And we just
Mhm.
sometimes we need to show up a little bit differently in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
part of our life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I love these ideas. This is really great. And especially that commute piece, I can really relate to that as well, because I used to work, about 45 minutes away. And so I did have that decompression time. I could sort
Mhm.
through anything that I needed to just to get done with it. And then I find myself sitting in the car many times as well, just for those 5 minutes of, okay, let's just balance. And then I can face and be connected at home.
Exactly.
Yeah. love that so much. It's so funny. Okay, so this has been really great. I'd love to get I had one question from our previous topic that came into my mind that I didn't want to forget to ask you about. When setting boundaries with our employers or our coworkers when we're coming back into the workforce, let's say we have some pushback and we have some mismatching expectations, right, with those we work with or a boss or something like that. Do you have any tips on how you can handle that while still being true to yourself and still, not maybe the solution is walking away from your job, but for many of us, that's not the solution, right? So where's the in between, and how do you recommend people navigate more of those more difficult conversations and mismatched expectations?
Yeah, so, I would start by knowing what you want, right? If
Yes.
you go into a discussion kind of loosey-goosey, like, hey, like, would it be okay if or sometimes it's really hard when it's like, no, just get very clear
Mhm.
on what you feel like you need and you
Yes.
want and what your exact ask is.
Mhm.
Because I feel like the more confident you can get in terms of, hey, this would be my ideal situation,
Yep.
and come in with kind of with that plan,
Mhm.
uh, the and also the reason for the plan,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Like, hey, my mornings are chaos right now.
Mhm.
For the next 3 months, I'd like to propose a trial of,
Mhm.
me working this hour to this hour, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Um, and I feel like if you come in more confident about
Mhm.
exactly what you're asking for and how that would help you,
Right.
but also how it could. I want you to keep in mind it also helps your employer
Mhm.
when
Yes.
you are uh, when you are able, right, to focus on
Mhm.
work.
Yes.
And when you aren't pulled in 7 different directions, right? When you have been able to take the time that you need to do the home stuff, you're not thinking
Right.
about that, at work, and it's not impacting negatively, right? Some of
Yes.
the things you're trying to get done. So I guess, sometimes there's a negotiation, right? If you
Mhm.
explain, hey, this is what I want, and they're like, well, that's not exactly possible, right? Or
Mhm.
I don't know
Right.
about that. You say, well, what could we do, right?
Mhm.
Like, what options are there?
Yeah.
Like, would you be willing to like brainstorm some ways with me? Or, would you be willing to, maybe allow me to discuss this with X team member to see
Yes.
to come up with a solution that would work, right? Or what's
Mhm.
the barrier essentially? Like,
Yeah.
what's the fear that
Mhm.
your boss has
Right.
about your your proposal, right? Because
Mhm.
again, sometimes it is just a fear of like, well, I don't want to look again less responsive to our clients,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Or, so I think just exploring what exactly where that pushback is coming from
Mhm.
will allow you to come up with a joint, a better joint solution as well.
Yeah. No, I love that, approaching it from a collaborative, like problem-solving type of mindset and still staying true to what works best for your family, but being open to the negotiations enough where you can still be seen as like, okay, I am trying to make this work, but I also have a very clear boundary, for my home life as well. So I like that suggestion. I think that's, and you mentioned too, like working with your coworkers. I know when I was in the corporate world, like the biggest thing that I would always hear, and I would tell my employees, like, let's be like solution based. So come to me with a few solutions to the problem that you're having, right? And then we can figure out and brainstorm what works best, and what meets the needs of all the moving parts. And so having that idea of, okay, maybe I can actually collaborate with my coworkers to make this work, and then bringing that to your boss, that really shows that initiative, that shows that you still really care about, the job you're doing, but that you also, this is important to you too as a boundary.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love that idea.
And just something I this might be abnormal, I don't know. I've actually never been told no.
Yeah. Mm.
So when I get up enough courage
Mhm.
to actually ask for what I want
Yes.
or what I need, I haven't been told no.
Mhm.
Like pre-COVID, so I was working, an hour away minimally. Like I had a commute.
Yeah.
I had just had again my second child. Things I
Mhm.
was struggling in all kinds of ways, right?
Mhm.
And I went to my boss and I said, "Look, I'm like, I, I this would really help if I could work
Mhm.
2 days from home." And this
Mhm.
was, again, unheard of at the time, right?
Right.
I mean, we were a full in-person office.
Mhm.
And you know what she said? All right, let me check with HR and see
Mhm.
what we can do.
Yeah.
So I did it,
Yeah.
right? And I started working 2 days from home. It could decompress the commute time.
Mhm.
I was able to spend at least those 2 mornings with more space and a little
Mhm.
bit more relaxed with myself and my kids, getting them, kind of where they needed to go. Um, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
That changed a lot about
Yes.
how I was feeling. So I just would encourage you to, think about like, well, if you ask, what's the worst that could happen? Like you're
Yeah.
just asking, like
Yeah.
essentially, right? And it's kind of stating your needs.
Mhm.
And I just think a lot of times we build ourselves up inside, like we get so afraid of
Yeah.
what someone's going to think or what they're going to say. It just rarely, in my experience, and also even when helping clients, it rarely happens the way that we're fearing it.
Yes. Mhm. Absolutely, and I think this self-advocacy and this, skill to voice our needs is a theme throughout our parenthood journey, right? And so I absolutely agree. Like, that's an internal skill. Like, really start knowing that you are a priority, what you want and need is a priority, and it's okay to ask for those things, right? And in fact, that's empowering, like, to be able to say, like, this is what I need. This is how I'm able to accommodate that to make sure everything else is fine. And, I'm going to get my work done or whatever the situation may be. But having that, control and that confidence and being able to, you know, voice what you need it's such an important skill and it's such a powerful skill. And I absolutely think that that's a really interesting thing that you mentioned that, how many times have you done that and it's been no? And for you, it's like not very many. And I'm thinking back for myself as well. And I'm like, you know what? When I finally was like, not people pleasing Jessi. And I was really, working on honing that skill of self advocacy and, allowing my voice to be heard and all those things. Absolutely. I hardly ever got a no. It maybe some, hey, would you be willing to do this negotiation side? But yeah, it's pretty interesting to think about how when we are showing up confidently and really letting our voice be heard and advocating for ourselves, there's a lot of power in that. And I think that, a lot of people would probably have a similar experience, hopefully.
No, definitely. Speaking up for yourself it really is a skill that I don't know if any of us are just kind of born with that, right? But for me, it comes from internally, like knowing
Yeah.
your needs and wants are valuable, like they are. You deserve to kind of um, uh, obtain them. And so it's a skill I continue to try to use all of the time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I think that really quickly, we can end on a note that I know you wanted to share, and that kind of segues nicely, but giving yourself the grace through this process. And I'd love to just hear your little piece of wisdom on that, because I do think it's a very important piece to this whole puzzle.
So this was something that honestly I still struggle with as well. Because I think for many of us, we're kind of like high achievers.
Yeah.
And we've just been that way. We've worked very hard to get to a lot of the places that we are today.
Mhm.
And we are sometimes our own worst critic,
Yes.
right? Um, and what I've had to learn is that if I can step outside of some situations that I may be experiencing and talk to myself like I'm talking to my best friend, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
It would sound a lot different than what's going through my head, if that
Yes.
makes sense,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that I was really hard on myself um, when I went back to work was that, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom. Like
Mm.
I'm not being a good mom because I have limited time that I spend, and the time that I do spend is like I'm anxious and I'm always
Mm.
having to do the next thing, and it's just rush, rush,
Mhm.
rush, and I was really hard on myself. But if I would have taken a step back, and if I would have like had a conversation with myself,
Yeah. Mhm.
like if my best friend were telling me, "Oh my gosh, like I feel like, I don't spend enough time,"
Mhm.
I was like, "Look, like you're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
Like this takes time, right?
Mhm.
Literally, your life just changed
Yeah. In
entirely."
every way.
And you just have to give yourself a little bit of space
Yeah.
and a little bit of more compassion than you're
Mhm.
giving yourself right now,
Right.
in order to figure out. But you have to know that you're capable. Like, you have to know that
Yes.
you're capable of figuring it out, right? And it will come with time if you
Mhm.
continue to work on just small adjustments, little by little, and, maybe get that support that you need to see things
Yes.
outside of yourself so you can see those blind spots. But,
Yes.
I just encourage people to talk to themselves more like you're your own best friend, right? Uh,
Yes.
or then sometimes, the criticism kind of uh,
Yeah.
speak that we get into our own head about.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. And that's a perfect thing for us to kind of close our time with is just this inspirational piece from Tara. And thank you so much again for joining me. I'd love for you to share really quickly, like how can people get in touch with you and connect with you?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I have a website, motherhoodbalanced.com.
Okay.
So if you would love to chat about one-on-one coaching or the Motherhood Work Life Success program that I
Mhm.
put together, it's a group coaching program. That really goes through what I see as those common barriers and struggles that women have.
Mhm.
It's the confidence, it's the traditional time management, but it's
Mhm.
feeling good about where you're spending your time, right?
Yes.
And it's about all of those routines that just really make your life hum, those
Mhm.
mental and those physical routines that really just kind of lighten the mental load in your life.
Yes.
So you can, if you're interested, in either that or just one-on-one coaching, feel free to schedule a call with me from that website and
Perfect.
to chat.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much, Tara. This has been a wonderful conversation. I just want to remind everybody that we are here every Thursday morning. So definitely tune in for more really great, helpful things for preparing you for your postpartum journey. And remember that this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks so much.